She thought it was just a spilled drink in a glittering restaurant. But that accident nearly cost a baby her life. Now, what began as a cruel insult has turned into a battle where vengeance collides with mercy, and a final decision rests in the hands of a mother who almost lost everything. The gilded cage gleamed like a crystal box against the night. Glassware chimed together, a cold, tinkling music threading through the faint laughter of people used to luxury. But in a corner under the warm yellow light, Chloe Davis, a black woman with smooth, bronze skin and a calm presence, occupied her own small world. She gently opened a little velvet box. Inside sat a delicate white gold baby bracelet, gleaming like a promise. The child in her womb was only 7 months along, but Chloe and Marcus had fought for this moment for 5 years. 5 years of tears, medications, and quiet prayers. The bracelet was more than a gift. It was a symbol of faith, of waiting, of a long, hard-won hope. Footsteps approached. A heavy metal tray, a bucket of ice. Karen Miller, a pale 20-something waitress with a lazy, sharp look in her eyes, stepped forward. In an instant, the tray slid. The hard clang of metal on marble cut through the room like a blade. Cold ice splashed everywhere, and the velvet box was submerged. The tiny bracelet tumbled to the dirty floor, rolled into the shadows. Vanishing like a piece of hope, smashed and buried. Karen leaned down, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, but her voice cut like a razor. Close enough for Chloe alone to hear. "Oh, sorry. Shiny little things like that don't belong here." Kind of like their owner. Chloe froze. She did not shout. She did not strike back. Instead, a sudden, sharp pain stabbed low in her belly, like a cold blade. Instinctively, her hands cradled her stomach. Her eyes widened in panic. Karen had no idea that her careless slip had just set off a time bomb inside a mother's body. The consequences would be far worse than a ruined piece of jewelry. A scream ripped through the polished air of the gilded cage. Marcus Thorne barreled in, face drained of color when he saw Chloe doubled over in a chair. Hands clamped to her belly, sweat pouring off her like rain. The suited patrons backed away. Karen Miller melted into a shadowed corner, leaving a strange, empty space beneath the warm lights. "Chloe." Marcus dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around his wife. He didn't look at Karen. He didn't care about the curious eyes fixed on them. His world narrowed to 2 things. Keep the woman he loved safe and protect the unborn child who hadn't even had its first cry. "Call 911. He barked, a command that silenced the room. The ambulance screamed through the night. Marcus rode beside the gurney, his big hand clutching Chloe's shaking fingers. He pressed his lips to her ear and whispered over and over, "It's okay, baby. The baby will be okay. Everything will be okay." But inside he knew those words were hollow, like driftwood in a flood. Under the hospital's cold fluorescent light, a doctor removed his glasses and told him gravely, "Mr. Thorne, the shock triggered premature contractions. We have to perform an emergency C-section. The baby is only 7 months. There's a high risk of complications." The floor dropped out from under Marcus. This was Marcus Thorne, the businessman who had made rivals tremble in boardrooms, famed for being icy and decisive. Now he was nothing of the sort. He was a desperate man, pushed out of the operating room doors, standing alone under indifferent white light, trembling at the thought of losing both his wife and his child. While Marcus ground his teeth in the hospital corridor, at a shabby bar on the edge of town, Karen Miller sat back on a warped stool, beer in hand, laughing loudly with coworkers. "Done," she crowed to a friend. "People like that don't belong at the gilded cage. She's probably crying at home over that cheap bracelet." Laughter followed, a pat on the back. To them, it was a bit of after-work entertainment. They had no idea, and no concern, that at the same time, Chloe Davis was not crying over jewelry. Chloe was lying motionless on an operating table, her body hollowed by surgery, while the baby she had waited 5 years for was taken from her too soon. Under the bright buzz of surgical lights and the whir of machines, Karen was not a demon. She was a product of envy, prejudice, and habitual cruelty, wrapped in indifference. It was that indifference, the smile at someone's pain, that proved the deadliest cut. Isabella Thorne arrived weighing less than 1.5 kilograms. A tiny body trembled, skin a bluish gray, breath fragile and shallow. She was placed immediately into an incubator in the NICU, where sterile white light and the smell of antiseptic became the only sky. For 2 months, the hospital became Marcus and Chloe's home. Chloe, raw from surgery and exhausted, kept the instincts of a physician. She sat with other mothers and explained dry medical terms in gentle ways, easing the fear in their eyes. She could not heal her own hurt, but she still gave others a little peace. Marcus was different. He went quieter, almost speechless. Day after day, he stood for hours watching his daughter through the glass, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles whitened. The man who had been ruthless in business had chosen gentleness when he married Chloe, and now helplessness turned that gentleness into something brittle. Sometimes he would look at his wife, small, strong, beside their child, and feel such pain swell up that he wanted to scream, wanted to smash the world. Instead, he swallowed it down and let it harden into a block of cold hatred. One night, when only the machines kept time with their steady beeps, Chloe dozed in a chair. Marcus put his hand on the incubator and stared at Isabella's fragile skin. His voice was low and heavy as stone. "I promise you, Isabella, the person who did this to you will pay, but not with death. Death is too easy. They will taste despair, day after day, like we did." He pulled out his phone and sent a short message to his private security team. "The Gilded Cage. Night shift that night. Investigate every detail. Stand by. No names. No direct target. Just the beginning of a hunt." Finally, after 2 long months, Isabella was strong enough to leave the NICU. Marcus carried his little girl, wrapped tight in a soft blanket, out of the hospital. Chloe walked beside them, still weak, but with a steady, fierce look in her eyes. The baby stirred softly in her father's arms. The mother pressed her cheek to a tuft of baby hair, as if she would never let go. They had been through hell. But for Marcus, this was not the end, it was the start. While the Thomases clung to one another, Karen Miller went on as before, clocked in, gossiped, laughed. She had no inkling that, in the quiet nights, Marcus had been sharpening a plan for revenge, crafting it piece by meticulous piece. He held his daughter close and his wife's hand, whispering in a voice low and hard as winter, "No one will ever touch this family again. No one." Karen thought she had only dirtied a trinket. The audience knows the truth. That careless slide nearly cost a life. Do you think any act of revenge by Marcus could be justified after all they endured? Leave your thoughts below. Marcus would not use violence. His weapons were contracts, lawyers, and phone calls in the dark. He would turn Karen's life into an invisible prison. And the next chapter, the storm, was about to begin. The first night Isabella came home, the Thorne mansion felt, for the first time in 2 long months, like it could breathe. Marcus sat in the dark of the living room and watched the crib where his daughter slept, her tiny chest rising and falling in slow, perfect rhythm. Chloe was exhausted and had dozed on the sofa nearby. He had them back. His family was safe. But that safety was as fragile as glass. He looked at his wife, at his child, and the anger he'd held like a hot coal for 2 months rose up again. Not burning now, but cold and surgical, sharp enough to cut. The promise he had whispered beside the incubator came back to him. It was time to act. He rose quietly and went into his study. He did not turn on the light. The glow of the computer screen painted his face emotionless. He opened an encrypted folder his security team had compiled over weeks. Surveillance footage from many angles, shift rosters, and clipped audio. Finally, a name appeared on the screen with a candid photograph. Karen Miller. Marcus stared at the face and the name. This was the origin of all their pain. He could have destroyed her with one phone call and ended it all in 24 hours. But swift death felt too easy, too merciful. He wanted her to feel despair drip in slow doses, the same way he and Chloe had been forced to live hour by hour. His revenge would be a poison that seeped, eating hope cell by cell. He issued the first orders. The operation without scalpels began. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It came on a Tuesday afternoon in the form of a thin letter printed in cold black type. The insurance company for Karen's mother announced a policy change. Karen crumpled the letter, accustomed to small hassles, and called the hotline, ready for a meaningless argument with a faceless clerk. The voice on the other end had no tremor. It was steady and mechanical. Ms. Miller, under the new policy, your mother's heart medication is no longer covered. I'm sorry. What? She's been on that medication for 5 years. Karen shouted, heat rushing to her face. She'll die without it. We understand your concern, the voice said without feeling. You may choose to self-pay. The amount currently is $4,000 a month. $4,000. The number landed like a blow. It wasn't just money. It was a wall, a suspended sentence. She hung up, chest tight, telling herself it was bad luck, a rotten insurance company. She had no idea Marcus Thorne had bought that insurer through a shell company just last week. Misfortune rarely comes alone. Weeks later, while the fear over, her mother's medicine still gnawed at her. Another letter arrived, this one from the shabby building management. Rent increased by $500 under the pretext of repairs and upgrades. At the same time, the manager at the Gilded Cage, a man who had often let Karen's small cruelties slide, called her into his office. Karen, he began, avoiding her eyes. Business has been slow. We have to cut staff hours. We can only offer you 15 hours a week. Karen went pale. 2 blows. 2 problems at once. This was no longer random bad luck. Some invisible hand seemed to be tightening around her life. Who could it be? The thought felt ridiculous, paranoid, so she pushed it away and clung to the simpler explanation. The world is always unfair to people like her. She took whatever odd job she could, cleaning offices at night, serving at cheap events, until her body was a map of exhaustion, dark circles carved under her eyes. She kept going for Liam, for her mother. The finishing blow fell on a Friday morning, months after that cursed night. The manager called her into his office again. This time, there was no hesitation in his voice. He showed her a grainy clip from months before, a tray tipping, a velvet box drenched, a woman's bitter remark. The new owner saw this footage, he said flatly. We can't risk the brand. You're fired. Effective immediately. He pushed a cardboard box across the desk. Take your things. Jobless, facing eviction, with her mother's medicine unaffordable, Karen sat on the bare floor of her apartment, surrounded by packed boxes she didn't know where to take. The tears had stopped coming. Inside was a hollow, a stunned numbness. It was no accident. It felt like punishment. But punishment by whom? For what? Her past fluttered through her mind in a ragged blur, nothing large enough to explain this avalanche. In the oppressive silence, the phone shrilled like a scream. An unknown number. She answered, voice raw. "Ms. Miller? This is St. Mary Hospital. You need to come in right away." Liam collapsed in gym class. Her world was shattered. She ran to the hospital in a daze. Everything blurred with tears. A kindly-looking doctor with worried eyes explained the situation. A congenital heart defect. Emergency surgery required. Cost estimated at $68,000. Karen laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. "$68,000? Doctor, I don't even have $68 in my pocket." The doctor's expression softened. He put a hand on her shoulder. "There is one hope. The city has a major charity fund, the Thorne Foundation. They often assist cases like this. But for a grant of this size, the final decision rests with the head of pediatric cardiac surgery. She has just returned from maternity leave." A fragile thread of hope flickered. Karen looked up, desperate. "Who is she? What's her name?" The doctor met her with a measured respect and answered slowly, as if speaking the name of someone both revered and feared, an exceptional surgeon. "Her name is Dr. Chloe Davis." The name Dr. Chloe Davis meant little to Karen at first, beyond a thin thread of hope. It was a title, a possible lifeline, maybe a stern older white woman with silver hair and glasses she could soften with. Tears. She had rehearsed the begging, the desperate weeping, the whole little performance to pry open a heart that might otherwise stay shut. The walk from the A to the chief of pediatric cardiac surgery's office felt like the longest journey of her life, each step heavy as if she carried stones. And when the oak door with a brass plaque reading Dr. Chloe Davis loomed into view, a small photo taped beside it, a newborn girl sleeping, the name Isabella written beneath, made her chest tighten with a strange flicker of sympathy for another mother, a feeling she shoved away, because right now there was only Liam. She knocked, and a calm voice told her to come in. She pushed the door, head bowed, words falling out of her like a prayer. "Doctor, I'm Liam Miller's mother. I came to—" Then she looked up, and everything stopped, because behind the large desk the woman who lifted her head was not a gray-haired stranger, but the black woman from that night. Thinner perhaps, tiredness sketched beneath her eyes. Undeniably the face Karen had tried to bury for 6 months, and for a fraction of a second Chloe's professional mask wavered as the memory of metal clashing. The ripping pain, the terror in the ambulance surged back like an undertow. But she steadied herself, calm honed by thousands of life-or-death operations, and watched as Karen's breath hitched and she staggered back, hand to her mouth, whispering, "No, it can't be." Then collapsed to her knees on the soft carpet, the sobs that tore from her not acted, but raw and animal. "It's you. Oh God, it's you?" Chloe did not show triumph. There was no gloating in her eyes, only a deep, heavy sorrow for the woman before her, for the innocent child in the A, and for the invisible scar that throbbed inside her own chest. And when Karen's cries dissolved into hiccuping gasps, Chloe finally spoke, voice threaded with fatigue rather than hatred. "Your choice that night, Ms. Miller," she said quietly, "forced my daughter to spend 2 months in an incubator, fighting for every breath." And at that moment the office door opened and Marcus Thorne stepped in, not in a suit but in a simple sweater, concern plain on his face as he asked, "Chloe, are you okay?" The assistant said Ms. Miller was here. "I wanted to make sure you're all right." The air around him at once the natural protectiveness of a husband and something else, a calm power, and Karen looked up through her wet lashes and saw, on Chloe's desk, framed photo of the two of them smiling, Chloe's hand on a pregnant belly. And then she recognized him as the man who had burst into the restaurant that night, shouting, "Call 911. The man who carried Chloe out in panic. But more crushing than recognition was the memory of the ER doctor's words. "There is a foundation that might help, the Thorne Foundation." And the realization hit like a blow. He was Chloe's husband. He was Thorne, Marcus Thorne. The invisible hand that had squeezed her life was not fate. It was him. Marcus finally fixed his gaze on her with a voice low and flat. Now you understand, don't you? Every bill, every layoff notice, those were mine. He stepped to the desk and dropped a folder with a dull thud. $68,000. That's the cost of your son's surgery. And by coincidence, a thin, cold smile flashed. That is also the total cost of my daughter's hospital stay. Fair, isn't it? The question hung loaded with the weight of his revenge, but Chloe, who had already made her choice, removed Marcus's hand from her shoulder with a gentle but resolute motion and rose to walk around the desk. Stand up, Miss Miller, she said, voice steady. And when Karen scrambled to her feet, Chloe continued, I will not let a child die, regardless of who his mother is. Then she took a pen and signed 2 documents with deliberate strokes. Approval for the operation and authorization for full payment from the Thorne Foundation. A quiet repudiation of Marcus's scheme. Karen stared at the ink as if it were a miracle and whispered, Why? Why would you? Chloe met her gaze, eyes clear and piercing, and answered simply, Because I am a doctor. And more than that, I am a mother. I know what it feels like to be paralyzed with fear when your child hangs between life and death. She paused, and then her voice hardened into an unflinching line that would not be crossed. But do not mistake this. Ms. Miller, this is not forgiveness. The words were not a threat, but a cold, immutable truth that closed the confrontation and opened a lifelong sentence of guilt for Karen's soul. The surgical lights blazed cold and sterile as 8 endless hours passed like a century. Inside, under that unforgiving glow, Dr. Chloe Davis led her team. The same hands that once trembled in fear and agony were now steady, precise to the millimeter. She was no longer Chloe the wife, Chloe the mother. She was Dr. Davis, a flawless machine built to wrestle with death. She stripped away every memory, every ghost of that horrific night, and focused only on the tiny, fragile heart beating inside Liam's chest. This was not just Hippocrates' oath. It was her ultimate declaration. You will not make me like you. Outside, the hallway stretched silently and mercilessly. Karen Miller sat rigid in a plastic chair, neither crying nor praying. She was still, like a statue carved out of shame. Marcus's revenge had crushed her worldly life, ripping away every shred of stability. That pain she could almost understand. Punishment you can see, punishment you can name. But Chloe's mercy? That was something else entirely. It was a blinding light thrown into the darkest corner of her soul, stripping bare her pettiness, cruelty, and spite. That spiritual devastation hurt far more than poverty or fear ever could. If Chloe had refused the surgery, Karen could have hated her, could have raged at their cruelty. Now she had no one to hate, but herself. At last, the door swung open. Chloe stepped out, weary but steady, her surgical scrubs traded for simple green hospital garb. The surgery was successful, she announced, professional voice even. Liam is out of danger. He'll need weeks to recover, but he's going to be fine. Karen lifted her tear-soaked face, her throat locked tight. Words of gratitude, real gratitude, clawed for release, but collapsed under their own weight. No syllable could carry what Chloe had just done. She could only look, eyes brimming with thanks, guilt, and fear before such unshuckable grace. Chloe studied her for a long moment before speaking again. My husband has stopped, she said. Everything will be restored. Your apartment. Your job is at another restaurant in his chain. Your mother's insurance. Karen froze. A new beginning. A second chance. It was unthinkable. But there is one condition, Chloe continued, her voice sharpening. Every weekend for 8 hours, you will serve as a volunteer in one of the city's poorest community centers. You'll serve meals, clean floors, and listen to people you once dismissed. You'll do this for 1 year? Karen bobbed her head furiously, tears spilling. Yes, I'll do it. I'll do anything. She thought this was atonement, a way to wash her sins clean. She was wrong. Chloe stepped closer, close enough for her words to cut like a whisper knife only Karen could hear. Don't mistake this for forgiveness. I do not forgive you. Karen shuddered. I'm doing this for Liam, Chloe continued, her voice an icicle. And for myself, to prove that your hatred wasn't strong enough to make me like you. She let the silence hang, each word searing into Karen's marrow. From now on, every time you look at your son, every time he laughs, every time he runs into your arms, every time he calls you Mom, you will remember. You will remember that he is alive, breathing, smiling because of the mercy of a black woman you tried to trample. You will remember that the heartbeat in his chest is a gift from the very woman whose child nearly lost hers because of you. Chloe's voice flattened, final and absolute. This debt, Karen, you will never repay. Then Chloe turned, spine straight, stride unwavering, leaving Karen alone in the cold hospital corridor. Liam's life was saved. Karen's material world restored. But her soul had been handed a life sentence. Every day to come she would live under the crushing weight of gratitude, heavier, sharper than any punishment Marcus could deliver. Every smile from her son would remind her of her guilt. Every act of kindness she performed would never tip the scales. She had been granted life, but stripped of the comfort of forgetting. And perhaps that was the cruelest form of justice. Not destruction, but salvation shackled to memory. A sentence of gratitude. Liam's life was saved. But Karen's soul, was it redeemed or condemned to the harshest punishment of all? Was Chloe's mercy an act of grace or the most refined revenge imaginable? If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Toch Story for more powerful tales that touch the heart and open the mind.